not everyone has the luxury of doing what John Jones did, taking 3 years off of their career to try and build as much size as they can to move up to the next weight class.
Right.
Some of us might need to do this in between fights in a period of 3 months, not 3 years.
Steroids.
A whole other conversation that I don't have with people.
Yeah. Hey, USADA is out of the picture.
I know.
Let's have that. What is their new protocol now?
I don't know. Honestly, I got to look into that.
I was looking at, or I was watching Rogan. He was like, their logo is just a wink.
No, I don't know. I've heard, like, I read that they're bringing in another organization to run it.
Yeah.
They brought in someone new to head that organization. It's going to be
Chael Sonnen.
It's going to be more similar to like what they do in the NBA and NFL. There's going to be some blood draw stuff that goes on. I don't know all the details enough to talk about it. I know they're going to have some kind of a protocol in place.
Okay.
Who's actually running it? Is it completely separate and independent, or is it in-house? I don't know any of that. So
what do you think about the I want to get into two things. I want to get into weight cutting and steroids.
All right.
Because I had a conversation in college with a guy, and I personally said, the only reason I wouldn't take testosterone is because if they test me, I'm in trouble.
Sure.
That's my only qualm with it. I don't think it's a sin. I don't think it's, I think it's a moral issue, and if it doesn't bother you morally, and then there's a legality to it. That's the only way I see it, and that's the only qualm I would have with it.
I agree.
Because at the end of the day, like fighting and maybe football, like contact sports, are really the only argument you have for not wanting to see the best that a human being can put out there.
Yeah.
Like in a race, like in a foot race.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see somebody take as many steroids as they can to get over that finish line as fast as possible. Like I would rather human beings be able to run 30 miles an hour than 25.
Okay.
If that, what do you think about that?
We on
the same page?
The stance I've always had with it is kind of that, like there's this moral facet to it, and then there's a legal facet to it. Right. The moral thing is very subjective. You're going to get a bunch of different opinions if you talk to a bunch of different people. The legality thing is it allowed or not?
Right.
And I tend to focus more on the legality of it. Like if we want a level playing field, which I think all of us want.
Sure.
One, there's no such thing as a level playing field.
No,
but
because
two, we also need to understand, like, again, how can we give the most guys the most opportunity for a level playing field, but there's still going to be guys that are going to take advantage of that. So like, let's say it's a free for all,
right?
Old school Pride, right? Pride didn't care if you took anything because the same thing.
It was
we want you to be the biggest, strongest, fastest version of yourself that you can be. Take whatever you want to take.
Well, wasn't it in their contracts to take things like that? They had to. Yeah. It's like if you don't take steroids, you're not going to be a part of this organization.
I've heard that. Yeah. So it's one of those things, like if you're just going to allow everyone to take it, cool. There should be no qualms about that. Now you can talk about the moral side all you want, but if it's allowed, it's allowed. But now it becomes like, who has the best doctor, who has the most money to spend on this kind of stuff, who's got the best access to the best resources, because not everyone's going to be able to have the same access to the same doctors and the same level of drugs to compete at that level. So there's still, it's not just a black and white thing.
I think what people there's a big misconception too, is like, just because somebody might be taking like TRT or, testosterone just in general, or a test booster, some of the things that are on the banned substance list, doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing it for nefarious reasons. It could just be, hey, I can't train 3 times a day like I want to, or I'm 35, 36 years old, like my body's been abused. Like I want to heal, I want to recover properly, and I can't do that. Or some guys have a full-time job, like they have to go to training and then they have to go to work. Like it's tough. I think there's a lot more. I personally think if the UFC regulated like a testosterone therapy, especially with all the injuries you get, and just because some of the drugs that you see on USADA's list, it's like these are like miracle drugs for people trying to heal. Like that's the big thing with Conor right now, right? Is like he wanted to heal his leg, and got out of the pool. Like that's not a moral issue. That's a legality issue.
It's a legality thing. So if it's allowed, then whatever. But if it's not allowed, it's not allowed.
Right.
Like that. I think that's the only stance that you can take on it. Like, is it allowed or not?
Right.
So if it's not allowed, then the punishment and the consequences of that should be the same for everybody across the board, period.
Right.
Right. Now we're getting into the moral aspect of it. Like if you get caught using it, the standard punishment, whatever it is, it should apply to everybody. The guy who's got his first UFC fight, or Conor McGregor, or everybody in between. Same across the board.
I agree.
But if steroids ever get to the point where they are not illegal and everyone's allowed to take them, well, that still creates some issues as far as like who has access to what.
Right.
But if he wants to take it for whatever reason, if it's legal, who's going to be able to say otherwise?
Where do you think it's going?
I don't think they'll ever be able to clear that hurdle of just allowing everyone to take whatever they want to take.
Right.
I think they'll get to a point where they can relax certain standards.
Right.
But I don't think it's ever going to be at the point where it's like, no, we're not going to drug test anybody. You could take whatever you want to take, because there is a cultural, moral, social component with that, especially like in this country. In Japan, all the people I've talked to that have lived in Japan, competed in Japan, that kind of stigma against steroids doesn't really exist over there as far as I know, right?
Really?
From what I've heard. Like, if they allow you to take it, take it. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you want to be the best that you can be? Right here. Oh, now we get a lot of people. It's like, well, morally, I think it's wrong, and I think it's right. I think people should be able to do this and that, and everyone's going to have an opinion and harp at each other.
Sure.
I don't think we're ever going to get to that point.
Right.
But if we're not, then we should just be focusing on the legality. If you can do it, go ahead, do it. Don't hurt yourself. Be smart about it.
Yeah.
Talk to the professional and like work it out. But if it's not allowed, don't do it.